My sister fired me as soon as she became CEO of our family business. Your services are no longer required, she announced during the board meeting I helped schedule. Clear your office by tomorrow. I nodded calmly and couldn't stop laughing. Next morning would be fun. The mahogany table felt cold beneath my fingertips. The surface was highly polished, reflecting the harsh track lighting of the Connors and Tate Solutions main boardroom. Outside, the Nashville autumn sky was a flat, uninspired gray, matching the mood Lana had just surgically imposed on the room. This was the precise moment she had played for over the past 2 decades. I looked around. 20 pairs of eyes met mine, a mix of mild embarrassment, detached curiosity, and outright confusion. Board members, most of whom I had personally recruited or impressed with quarterly reports, shifted uncomfortably in their high-backed leather chairs. The soft click of the heavy door, closing behind me a moment later, was the only thing that interrupted the stunned silence that followed Lana's pronouncement. A sound that belied the absolute magnitude of the professional execution that had just occurred. Until 10 minutes ago, I was Jada Connors, the 43-year-old executive vice president of operations at the company my grandfather founded. For 12 years, I had been the operational backbone, the mind that structured the logistics deals, and the person who secured the contracts that accounted for well over 70% of our annual revenue. Lana, meanwhile, excelled at corporate image, schmoozing, and playing political chess with the board, a game I had always considered beneath me. I had been the engine, she had been the hood ornament. Now, she was the CEO, and the hood ornament had just discarded the engine. Is that all? I heard myself ask. My voice was level, almost impossibly so, given the volcanic anger bubbling in my chest. I had worked too long and too hard to give her the satisfaction of a visible crack in my composure. Yes, Jada. That will be all, Lana replied, already flicking her attention to the laminated agenda, signaling that the matter was closed, decided, and entirely irrelevant to the future business of Connors and Tate. She wore a self-satisfied smile, the kind that always felt borrowed. Like a too expensive piece of jewelry she hadn't earned. It was the smile of victory, won on the merits of favoritism, not ability. I gathered my notepad and my custom engraved pen, a gift from a major client, nodded politely to the room's collective awkwardness, and walked out. Dignity was all I had left in the building, and I clung to it fiercely. I made the familiar turn toward my corner office, a space I had earned through 18-hour days and countless successful, headache-inducing infrastructure overhauls. My assistant, Natalie, looked up immediately. She had been taking calls, her headset resting loosely on her head. Her expression was bright, but when she saw my face, her own collapsed into a mask of pure concern. Jada, what happened in there? She whispered, the headset dropping to her desk with a small thud. I closed the door behind me, the sound a soft finality. I sank into my large executive chair, allowing the initial shock to fade into cold, hard planning. Lana fired me, I said, the words feeling strangely weightless. Effective immediately. I need to clear out tomorrow. Natalie's jaw dropped. She can't do that. Without you, this place willed. She can. And she did. I interrupted, raising a hand. Dad made her CEO, and the board approved it. It's her show now. But why? You've brought in over 70% of our major clients. Natalie insisted, her eyes wide with disbelief. I managed a faint, knowing smile. The first genuine expression since I'd left the boardroom. And that's precisely why. I've outshined her for years, and she couldn't stand it. It was never about the business, it was about the title. The initial sting of betrayal gave way to a curious, powerful calm. I leaned forward, my hands finding the familiar weight of my large desk drawer handle. I pulled it open and reached deep inside, past the rubber bands and old business cards, and retrieved a leather portfolio. But as it turns out, I said, the calmness in my voice hardening into resolve. I saw this coming 5 years ago. I placed the portfolio on the desk. Natalie's eyes widened with sudden realization. Jada, she breathed. Using my full name as she always did, when something truly serious was underway. That restructuring you implemented 5 years ago. The one where you created VC Strategy Group. I opened the portfolio. Inside were documents that detailed the precise structure that had been my professional security blanket for half a decade. The consulting LLC, I confirmed, a true, brilliant smile finally breaking through. The one that technically holds all the client contracts. Your consulting LLC, Natalie confirmed, her voice hushed, realizing the full scope of my maneuver. The one that technically holds all the client contracts. I nodded, the smile freezing on my face. It was relief, yes, but also the grim satisfaction of a plan that had been quietly maturing for years. On paper, it was a tax efficiency measure. A way for me to negotiate directly with clients, without all the corporate red tape. As I explained to Dad. He signed off on it, of course. Why wouldn't he? It was an efficient little fix that made the bottom line look even better. I paused, tapping the leather portfolio. In reality, it was my insurance policy. My only shield against exactly this moment. For over a decade, my life had been split in two. There was Jada, the daughter, always trying to earn a word of genuine, unreserved praise from my father, James Connors. And then there was Jada, the operational genius, the only person who truly understood the sprawling, complex web of logistics that was Connors and Tate. The daughter was constantly failing, the genius was constantly delivering. I learned early that my father and my sister valued the appearance of success over the mechanism of it. Lana had the right look, the social connections, and the crucial ability to never challenge Dad's authority. I, conversely, had too many ideas. I remembered a tense dinner, perhaps 7 years ago. I had proposed streamlining our Southeast warehousing facilities, a move that would save us nearly $300,000 annually in overhead. You're making waves, Jada? Dad had said, waving his hand dismissively while sipping his Cabernet. Let's stick with what works. Lana had offered a perfectly timed, soft chuckle from across the table. Jada is just too efficient for her own good, Dad. She forgets not everyone thinks in flowcharts. That memory, that dismissal, that casual disregard for the value I created, was the ghost that haunted me. The public preference shown to Lana was the deep, painful wound. It fed the lie I lived by. That my work must speak for itself, that revenue was the only thing that could ever truly validate my worth in their eyes. So, I built the shield. With the help of my corporate attorney, Grace Levinson, I created VC Strategy Group. We made the paperwork intentionally dense, scattering the key contractual details across various legal documents under the guise of complexity. Over time, I migrated all the major client relationships, the real revenue generators, to my LLC. The contracts listed VC Strategy Group as the primary service provider, with Connors and Tate simply listed as the fulfillment partner. We were the brain, they were the body. And they never checked. Natalie asked, leaning closer, captivated by the story. Lana was too busy planning her CEO office renovation and networking to notice which name was on the header of the contracts I secured. I said, a dry bitterness in my voice. And Dad, why would he question anything that improved the bottom line? To him, it was just one of my efficient little fixes, not the foundation of my independence. I picked up the Skyline distribution file, our largest account. I flipped to the service agreement. The corporate logo of VC Strategy Group was there, small but undeniable, right above the full, formal name of Connors and Tate Solutions. Lana thinks she fired the engine, I told Natalie, my tone now shifting from calculated confidence to genuine resolution. She hasn't reviewed the agreements yet. She doesn't realize she just fired the client list. I dictated a formal memo to Grace, my attorney, detailing Lana's action and instructing her to be ready to confirm the contractual agreements should the board panic. My mind was sharp, focused entirely on logistics, no longer on betrayal. The anger was gone, replaced by the cool, metallic taste of strategy. Natalie, I said, getting up to fetch a box. Get a list of every vital piece of software access we need. We are going dark on their systems tonight. But we need our own versions ready to spin up within 48 hours. I began carefully boxing up the awards, the diplomas, and the framed photos of my grandfather, the man who started it all, not my father. I left the company, issued computer, the executive chair, and the luxurious corner view. Those belonged to Connors and Tate. But the knowledge, the contacts, and the crucial documents, those belonged to me. I think it's time to remind my sister exactly who brings in the business around here. I concluded, closing the box with a precise snap. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but the longest day of my career was about to turn into the most intense night. Tomorrow morning, the real fun would begin. I had spent the evening drafting a detailed operational plan, coordinating with Grace, and ensuring Natalie had the necessary access codes for the new cloud-based software we would need. When I arrived at the Connors and Tate building at 7 o'clock the next morning, the parking lot was almost empty, and the lobby was silent. I chose this time deliberately. There was no need for an audience for my departure. I walked directly to my office, my cardboard box flat beneath my arm, and began the methodical process of packing. I boxed up family photos and the various industry awards I had won over the years, relics of a time when I mistakenly believed those achievements would protect me. I was finished boxing the last of my personal items, just as the first employees began trickling in around 8 o'clock. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was an incoming call from Bate Winters, the procurement director for Skyline Distribution. Skyline was not just our largest client. Their relationship was the cornerstone of our entire revenue base. I smiled to myself, picking up the call. The dominoes were starting to fall. Good morning, Bate, I said, my voice warm and professional. Jada, what is going on? Bate's voice was sharp, edged with confusion and frustration. I just got a strange email from your sister saying she's my new point of contact. She sounds lovely, but she's talking about synergies and brand alignment. And I need to know why our logistics chain is suddenly going to be managed by the marketing department. I leaned back in the chair, enjoying the familiar sound of client panic. Yes, Bate, there have been some changes. Lana is the new CEO. But she's going to be focusing on the company's broader corporate image. But our agreement is with you, Jada? Bate insisted. The contract is with VC Strategy Group. Does she understand that? Because if she thinks we're going to accept a transition that compromises our supply chain uptime, she's mistaken. I don't think she has reviewed the contracts yet. I replied, keeping my tone perfectly neutral, even slightly apologetic. Would you like me to clarify things with her? Please do, Bate said immediately. We signed with you, not with Connors and Tate. Your expertise is what we're paying for. If you're not there, we're not there. After hanging up, I continued packing, my heart feeling lighter with every passing minute. Bate's call was the sweet, tangible validation I needed. It was confirmation that the value I brought was independent of my family's name. Within the next half hour, 2 similar calls came in. One from Thomas Graham at Evergreen Supply Chain, the other from Maria Rossi at Global Freight Forwarding. None of them had any intention of working with Lana. At 8:30 in the morning, right as the office started to buzz with the usual Tuesday energy, my phone lit up with Lana's name. I let it ring twice, enjoying the suspense, picturing her standing in her massive, newly renovated CEO office, the panic slowly turning to a cold dread. Hello, Lana. I answered calmly. Where are the client files? Her voice was tight, betraying a controlled, frantic edge. And why is Bate Winters saying she won't work with us anymore? The client files are exactly where they've always been, I replied, matching her tempo perfectly. In the shared drive, organized by account. As for Bate, she's exercising her contractual rights. What are you talking about? Lana snapped. What contractual rights? I could almost see the color rising in her face. The immaculate pantsuit, the carefully styled hair, all crumbling under the pressure of actual operations. Check the contract headers, Lana, I instructed, my voice unwavering. All of our major accounts are contracted through VC Strategy Group, my consulting company. Connors and Tate is just the fulfillment partner. The clients chose to work with me, not the family brand. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched out for a long count of 3, then broke with a strangled sound of fury. You can't do this! This is sabotage! I couldn't help the small, triumphant laugh that escaped me. I already did, 5 years ago, actually, with Dad's approval and the board's signature on every document. You deliberately missiled everyone. No, Lana, I countered, tamping down the last bit of my anger, to deliver the final blow with cold precision. I created a business structure that protected both the company and the clients. It's not my fault that you never bothered to understand how our business actually operates. That's on you. The contracts, the relationships, the trust, the actual revenue-generating contracts, those are mine. I finished for her. You wanted to be CEO. Congratulations. I disconnected the call without another word. As I placed the phone back on the cradle, Natalie appeared at my door, not with her usual coffee, but with an empty cardboard box of her own. Her eyes were bright, fierce, and entirely resolved. "I quit this morning," she announced with a huge smile. "Told Human Resources I'll be joining VC Strategy Group effective immediately. If the logistics queen is leaving, the whole court goes with her." The realization hit me fully. This wasn't just sweet revenge against Lana. This was my chance to build something entirely mine, built on competence, not blood. I picked up my box, which felt lighter now that it contained my future, and took one last look at the office. "Let's go," I said. "We have a company to build." The moment Natalie and I walked out of the building, the air felt lighter, sharper. We drove straight to my house in Belle Meade. The dining room table, usually reserved for holiday dinners and casual correspondence, instantly became the command center for VC Strategy Group. I spent the rest of the day on the phone, moving through my client list with surgical precision. I wasn't selling them on a new company. I was simply confirming the continuation of the working relationship they already had. By early evening, I had confirmed what I already suspected: all 14 of our top-tier accounts would be following me. Together, they represented 80% of Connors and Tate's annual revenue, a fact that was both terrifying and exhilarating. But the relief was short-lived. The second question, after they confirmed their loyalty, was always the same. "What about fulfillment?" asked Thomas Graham from Evergreen Supply Chain. "You've got the relationships, Jada, but can you handle the actual logistics work? We need warehouse capacity, trucks, software systems, and real-time inventory tracking." It was a perfectly fair question, and it slammed me back to reality. Until yesterday, I had had the massive, established infrastructure of Connors and Tate at my disposal, their warehouse network stretching across the Southeast, their dedicated transportation partners, their proprietary software systems. That was all gone. I had successfully severed the brain from the body. But now I had to build a whole new body. And I had to do it immediately while the brain was already processing orders. "I've been anticipating this transition for some time," I assured Thomas, pouring every ounce of professionalism into the lie. "I've already secured partnerships with 3 regional fulfillment centers. Your operations won't miss a beat. We are fully operational." What I didn't tell him was that those partnerships had only been finalized that afternoon. They were hastily signed temporary agreements, secured through a dizzying flurry of phone calls to regional competitors and third-party logistics firms I had previously kept on my radar. I was building the airplane while flying it. The air was thin, the altitude high, and the turbulence severe. By 9 o'clock that night, my dining room table was a war zone. It was covered with legal pads, scrawled with hastily drawn network diagrams, my laptop was running hot, and an empty pizza box sat in the center. I had the clients, I had Natalie, and I had a fragile, patchwork framework for operations. What I didn't have was a team. As if reading my mind, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jordan Ellis, our former operations manager at Connors and Tate. Jordan was brilliant, loyal, and had been consistently stifled by Lana's preference for IS men. The text simply read, "Heard what happened. Lana's freaking out. Half the ops team is ready to walk. You hiring?" I felt a surge of hope. realizing that my professional reputation was stronger than Lana's corporate authority. I was about to text Jordan back when my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I ignored it, focused on the hiring opportunity. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. It was from my father, James Connors. Subject, urgent. Kale Mani. I skimmed the two-line body. He was clearly worried about the revenue stream, not about me. I closed the laptop. Whatever he had to say could wait. I was not going to give him the satisfaction of knowing he could derail my focus simply by sending a concerned email. I was finally operating outside his orbit of approval, and I wasn't going back. This decision, to prioritize the business over the emotional pull of my father, was a significant step in addressing my deep-seated wound. I immediately texted Jordan back. Send me names. Everyone who's interested. Competitive packages for all. Just as I hit send, my phone rang again. This time it was Lana. I let it go to voicemail, watching her name flash on the screen, feeling a cold indifference. When it rang a third time, I finally answered. This isn't a request, Jada. Lana snapped, her voice high and strained. The board is calling an emergency meeting for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. They want to understand what's happening with our client base. You owe them an explanation. I don't owe anyone anything, Lana. I replied evenly, resting my elbow on the mountain of legal pads. You fired me, remember. Your services are no longer required. Those were your exact words. That was before I understood the situation with the contracts. The contracts that have been in place for 5 years. The ones that were approved by Dad and the board. Those contracts. I took a deep, steadying breath, tamping down the lingering need to scream. It's not my fault that you never bothered to understand how our business actually operates. That's on you. Dad will never forgive you for this, she whispered, deploying her usual trump card. Perhaps, I said, looking down at my tired hands. But unlike you, I've learned to live without his approval. I hung up before she could respond. The conversation left me strangely energized. The betrayal of the past had cleared the path for the future. In trying to sideline me, Lana had inadvertently given me the push I needed to break free and validate my own worth. I opened my laptop again, deleting the half-formed response I had been planning for my father. Instead, I opened a new document and typed out the first line of my new business plan. VC Strategy Group. Fuller Logistics Solutions. It had a very nice ring to it. The morning after my dismissal brought a flurry of developments that felt more like a logistical blitzkrieg than a business startup. By 7 o'clock, Jordan Ellis had sent me a list of 8 key employees, analysts, account managers, and logistics specialists, all ready to join VC Strategy Group immediately. Their loyalty felt like a powerful, tangible asset, far more valuable than the brick and mortar of Connors and Tate. By 7:30, my attorney, Grace Levinson, was on her way to the emergency Connors and Tate board meeting to represent my interests. I had instructed her to observe, to listen, and to present the contractual facts only when necessary. I wanted them to sweat. By 8 o'clock, I was sitting in a temporary office space I had secured overnight, a plain, windowless conference room in a shared office complex miles away from downtown Nashville. The 8 employees who had accepted Jordan's offer, including Natalie and Jordan himself, were gathered around a scarred laminate table. This was the inaugural meeting of my company. The situation is unique. I began, looking around at the nervous but determined faces. We have the clients and the expertise. We have 80% of the revenue stream that walked out of Connors and Tate yesterday. But we are building our infrastructure on the fly. I pulled out a simplified network diagram I had drawn the night before, showing the 3 regional fulfillment centers we were partnering with. One in Chattanooga, one in Louisville, and a temporary overflow facility in Atlanta. It won't be easy, I admitted. We will be relying on temporary contracts and external partners for the next 3 to 6 months. But we've got something Connors and Tate doesn't have anymore: the relationships that matter and the team that executes. Natalie and Jordan nodded confidently. The others, the younger analysts, looked anxious, their career security hanging on my ability to pull off this colossal pivot. "What about the warehouse contracts?" asked Michael Perez, one of our most experienced logistics specialists. "Connors and Tate has exclusivity with most of the best facilities in the region. They will try to lock us out." "They do," I acknowledged, knowing that was a significant risk. "Which is why we're not fighting on that front. We'll utilize the facilities in Chattanooga and Louisville, routing through them, until we can establish our own local presence. It adds 24 hours to some delivery cycles initially, but we can compensate by optimizing the first and last mile transport." Just as Michael nodded thoughtfully, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Grace. I put her on speakerphone, gesturing for the team to listen closely. "The board meeting just ended," Grace reported, her voice calm but professional. "It was contentious." "Tell me," I prompted, already sensing the impending win. "Lana tried to argue that your LLC structure was a breach of fiduciary duty. She wanted the board to pursue immediate legal action and freeze your assets." My stomach tightened, despite my confidence. A lawsuit, even an illegitimate one, would consume resources we desperately needed for operations. And the board shut her down thoroughly," Grace reported. "Apparently, 2 of the older, wiser members, the ones who always read the fine print, actually remembered approving the contracts when they were signed 5 years ago. They reminded Lana that the structure had delivered exceptional results and high profit margins consistently. They confirmed the contracts are legally sound." A wave of profound relief washed over me. No lawsuit. No messy, public fight over legitimacy. The shield had held firm. "So, no lawsuit," I repeated, exchanging a look with Natalie and Jordan. "No lawsuit," Grace confirmed. "But they did authorize her to make you a counteroffer. They want to bring VC Strategy Group in as a formal, permanent contractor with a 5-year commitment." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or express a frustrated howl. "They fire me, then offer to hire my company." "Essentially, yes," Grace said. "The offer is actually quite good. 7 figures annually, guaranteed minimums, performance bonuses. They are desperate, Jada. They just realized they lost 80% of their revenue stream overnight." I looked around the table at my new team, all watching intently, their anxiety lifting. They needed to see that the risk they took was already paying off. "Tell them I'll review their proposal," I instructed Grace. "But we are moving forward with direct client relationships in the meantime." We are not pausing our operations for them. After ending the call, I turned back to the team. It seems we have options. We are the prize now. Are you considering it? Jordan asked, his expression immediately concerned. Going back to them as a contractor. I understood his worry. He and 7 others had just resigned their secure jobs to follow me. They needed reassurance. I'm not considering anything that doesn't include all of you, Jordan, rest assured. I promised. But having Connors and Tate as a high-paying client rather than an employer could be advantageous, while we build our own independent operations. It buys us time and removes a major competitor immediately. The temporary office door opened, and a courier delivered a thick, expensive-looking envelope addressed to me. Inside was the formal, printed offer from the Connors and Tate board, detailing the attractive contractor terms. Tucked into the proposal was a single, folded sheet of paper. It was a handwritten note from my father. You've outplayed us all. I should have made you CEO years ago. I stared at the note, the complex emotion churning inside me, a mix of satisfaction, vindication, and deep melancholy. After decades of being overlooked, my father had finally recognized my value, but only after I demonstrated my power to effectively dismantle the company he had built. It was a victory, but it tasted bittersweet. The buzzing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was a text from Lana. This isn't over. Of course, it wasn't. But for the first time in our lives, her threats felt hollow. I had the clients, I had a growing team, and most importantly, I had leverage. And now, I had my father's written admission that I was the better business mind. The final chapter of my rise was about to begin. The coming weeks established a grueling new reality. Building a company from scratch, while simultaneously servicing 14 major clients, proved even more challenging than I'd anticipated. Our small, temporary office became a command center of organized chaos. We worked 14-hour days, fueled by bad coffee and the adrenaline of sheer necessity. Every morning began with an all-hands meeting to triage the day's most pressing logistics issues, and every evening ended with a comprehensive review of what we'd managed to accomplish and what critical infrastructure still needed attention. My old life had been exhausting, but it was predictable. This was relentless, demanding immediate, inventive solutions to problems Connors and Tate had spent 30 years solving. The temporary fulfillment partnerships were fragile, and the software integration was constantly threatening to crash. We were successful, but we were stretched thin, operating with zero margin for error. About 3 weeks in, I finally found time to properly respond to the Connors and Tate board's offer. I had held onto the proposal, letting their desperation mature. Knowing that Everyday VC Strategy Group continued to operate successfully made my leverage stronger. I invited Grace to my home office to review my counter-proposal before I sent it. Grace sat opposite me, her face thoughtful as she read the terms I had drafted. "This is aggressive, Jada," she noted, looking up from the pages. "You're asking for double their initial offer, plus equity in Connors and Tate. 5% specifically. Enough to have a voice. Not enough to trigger immediate, crippling resentment," I clarified. The equity was the key. It was the ultimate protection against future political maneuvering. Grace leaned back in her chair, setting the document aside. "Jada, can I be blunt? I nodded, bracing myself. I trusted Grace's judgment implicitly because, unlike my family, she was ruthlessly objective. This feels personal, she stated. I know it is family. But this counter is structured to prove a point, rather than make the absolute best business decision. Their initial offer was generous. Doubling down might be unnecessarily antagonistic, which could drive them to a competitor, even if it's less efficient. Her observation stung because it contained truth, and that truth touched the core of my wound. Was I pushing so hard because of business, or because I still needed to shove my victory in Lana's face? Was I trying to build an empire, or just trying to destroy the kingdom that never chose me? I was risking the perfect resolution, the secure, high-paying contract, to satisfy a score I had already won. I had to face the ghost of my father's constant disapproval one last time. You're right, I conceded, exhaling slowly. It's a reaction. Revise it to a 20% increase over their offer, with the 5% equity request intact. That's fair market value for what we bring to the table and what we save them. Grace nodded, her approval visible. Much better. Now, what about your sister? She's been notably quiet since that text message. That's unusual for Lana. I had been wondering the same thing. Lana's silence was unnerving. She was either plotting something complex, or she was entirely consumed by the chaos I had left behind. I have a meeting with her tomorrow, I admitted. Just the two of us. Away from the company. She requested it. Do you want me there? I shook my head. No. Some conversations need to happen without lawyers. This is the last confrontation I have to win alone. The following day, I met Lana at a small, upscale coffee shop. It was neutral territory, equidistant from our respective offices. She was already seated when I arrived, sipping tea, her demeanor unusually subdued, her expression unreadable. She still looked pristine, but there was a faint, almost invisible tightness around her eyes. You look tired, she said as I sat down. Building a company is exhausting, I replied, my voice dry. You'd know that if you'd ever done it. It was a cheap shot, but weeks of stress had worn my diplomacy thin. Surprisingly, Lana didn't take the bait. She stirred her tea slowly, looking down at the porcelain cup. I've been doing some thinking, she said finally, looking up. About why you set up that LLC structure in the first place. Enlighten me. You never trusted us, she stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple, cold fact. Not me, not Dad, not the board. You always needed your own safety net. I considered her words, which for once, cut through the superficiality. Trust has to be earned, Lana. Dad spent years overlooking my contributions while elevating yours. You spent years taking credit for my work. What exactly was I supposed to trust? We're family, she insisted, as if the phrase itself were a business strategy. Family businesses fail precisely because people confuse family loyalty with business sense, I countered. Dad made you CEO because you're his daughter, not because you were the best person for the job. And you created a secret company to steal our clients, because you're what? Some misunderstood business genius. She shot back, the control finally beginning to crack. I created a structure that protected the value I built. I corrected her firmly. Value that you and Dad were happy to benefit from until you decided I was expendable. Lana's facade finally shattered. Her eyes glistened with frustrated anger. You want to know why Dad made me CEO instead of you? Because you're ruthless, Jada. This stunt with the contracts proves it. You'd burn down the whole company to prove a point. Her words hit harder than I expected, because they revealed how I was seen. Not as the efficient logistics expert, but as a destroyer. Was that the consequence of my defensive strategy? I didn't burn anything down, I said quietly, leaning forward across the small table. This was the moment to face the accusation of the ghost head-on. You lit the match when you fired me. I'm just making sure I don't get consumed in the flames. We stared at each other across the table. Decades of sisterly competition, professional jealousy, and familial neglect distilled into this moment of brutal, painful honesty. So, what happens now? Lana finally asked, defeated. That was the million-dollar question. So, what happens now? Lana's question, delivered across the coffee shop table, was the sound of a queen conceding her crown. We'll move forward, I replied simply, pulling back slightly from the intensity of the confrontation. I sent the board my counter proposal this morning. It includes a 20% increase on their offered annual rate and 5% equity in Connors and Tate. Lana's eyes widened, her composure finally shattered by the sheer audacity of the demand. Equity. You want 5% of the company you just crippled. I want security. I corrected her. I want a voice. And I want assurance that the value I bring will never again be dismissed by politics or familial preference. That's the price for saving the 80% of your revenue that I control. I left the coffee shop after that, not waiting for her response. The conversation had been necessary, a final, painful lancing of the wound. I had faced her accusations and accepted the mantle of ruthlessness, choosing self-preservation over the illusion of family harmony. The weeks that followed were relentless. VC Strategy Group secured its position, moving from a survival stance to an aggressive growth model. We signed Connors Defense, a massive government contractor, and integrated them seamlessly, leveraging our newly established fulfillment networks in the neighboring states. Their contract alone was projected to push VC Strategy Group's annual revenue past $40 million, nearly double what my small team had managed while under the stifling oversight of Connors and Tate. 3 months after Lana fired me, I stood in the expansive, immaculate lobby of Connors Defense, watching their automated systems handle inbound freight. Impressive operation you've built in such a short time, Jada, remarked Edward Hughes, Connors' procurement director, as he led me through their cavernous facility. We had a unique launching point, I explained, maintaining my professional smile. An established team, proven expertise, just under a new banner. And without the family drama, I hear. He gave me a knowing look. Nashville's business community isn't that large, Jada. Word gets around. Every company has its evolution story. Indeed, I said. And we are excited to be evolving with you directly. Your reputation for hands-on management is exactly what we need for our supply chain overhaul. Later that afternoon, I returned to our new permanent offices. We had moved out of the temporary suite and into a beautifully renovated warehouse space. Exposed brick walls, open workstations, and private meeting rooms named after our first loyal clients. In just 3 months, we had grown from 8 employees to 23. Jordan met me at the door, barely containing his excitement. The Connors and Tate board accepted the counter proposal, he announced, grinning broadly. We're officially their primary logistics partner for the next 3 years. 5% equity and the 20% rate increase. I felt a complex wave of emotions, satisfaction, undeniable victory, and a touch of professional melancholy for the business I had almost destroyed. Have they announced it internally yet? I asked. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. Jordan confirmed. Lana, will have to explain to the entire company that they're now subcontracting their core business function to her sister's rival firm. That can't have been an easy pill for her to swallow. She fought it until the end, I imagine. I sighed, walking toward my office. From what my contacts tell me, she did. Jordan said. The board finally gave her an ultimatum: accept the partnership or resign. They refused to jeopardize the company further. Do you care? It was a fair question, echoing the one Lana had posed to me in the coffee shop. Did I care that I had forced my sister into this corner? I care, I admitted, looking at the vibrant, chaotic energy of the new office. But not enough to sacrifice what we're building here. Our success is our best security. The formal announcement of our partnership with Connors and Tate triggered a new, powerful phase of growth for VC Strategy Group. With our former employer, now effectively our largest client, and me holding 5% of their stock, we had the stability to pursue even more aggressive expansion. 6 months after Lana fired me, I found myself preparing for a meeting I never expected to have. My father had requested lunch, just the two of us, at his favorite steakhouse. I knew what this was: the final surrender, the full circle. He was already seated when I arrived, looking visibly older. The stress of the company's near collapse had taken a toll far greater than any logistics crisis. You look good, Jada, he said, standing to greet me. Success suits you. Thank you, Dad, I replied, uncertain where this was heading. I owe you an apology, he continued, surprising me completely. His voice was tired, stripped of its old, dismissive authority. Several, actually. I waited, giving him space to elaborate, finally facing the man who had instilled the wound I had spent my entire career trying to stitch closed. I should have recognized your talents years ago, he said, shaking his head. Should have made you CEO when I stepped down. I was blinded by traditional thinking. The oldest child inherits the crown, regardless of capability. Lana had her strengths, I offered, feeling a strange, unexpected urge to defend my sister now that the war was won. She did, but they weren't the right ones for leading the company, he said, meeting my gaze directly. You outmaneuvered all of us, Jada. Created your own safety net right under our noses. I'm not sure whether to be angry or impressed. Both would be appropriate, I said with a small, genuine smile. The board is considering a restructuring, he said after a pause, lowering his voice. They want to bring you back. Not just your company as a contractor, but you personally as CEO. I nearly choked on my water. The ultimate prize, offered to me, finally, directly. And Lana, she transitioned to Chief Marketing Officer. It is her natural strength, he replied, resignedly. She'd never accept that, I countered. She already has, he said, conditionally. What condition? That you two find a way to repair your relationship, he said. looking at me with the weary hope of a founder seeing his legacy crumble. That's why I'm here, Jada. Not just as your father, but as the company founder. We need both of you working together, instead of against each other. I sat back, processing this staggering development. The CEO title, the family company. The final approval of my father. It was everything I thought I wanted when I first started building that protective shield. I don't know if that's possible, I confessed. The gulf between Lana and me had grown so wide, I couldn't imagine bridging it now. Perhaps not, he said. But isn't it worth trying? Perhaps not, I mused, looking past my father to the bustling, impersonal traffic outside the steakhouse window. But isn't it worth trying? His question hung there, a final, seductive trap. The offer was the ultimate emotional validation. The CEO title, the family company, the public acknowledgement that I was the superior choice. It would erase the memory of the boardroom firing completely. It would finally satisfy the Ebers want that had driven me for 20 years. But was it the right thing for Jada, the business architect? I realized that accepting the CEO role meant trading the freedom I had fought so hard to secure for a return to the constant political toxicity of the family structure. It meant putting myself back into a position where I was measured by my sister's grudges and my father's expectations, where I would have to navigate the inevitable boardroom resentments over the 5% equity and the high contractor rate. I would be returning to the source of the wound, hoping a title could heal it. The truth I needed to learn, the need, was that my worth was defined by the success of VC Strategy Group. Not by James Connors's belated approval. I had built an empire from an empty box in 6 months, with 23 loyal employees and a roster of clients who chose me based purely on competence. My current path was my true legacy. Dad, I began, choosing my words carefully. I appreciate the offer, deeply. And the apology means more than you know. I paused, looking at his hopeful face. But I have to decline the CEO position. His face fell immediately, the disappointment palpable. Jada, why? This is everything you worked for. No. This is everything I worked at, I corrected gently. Everything I worked for is outside. It's a company built on my values, without the limitations of tradition. We are generating massive revenue, and we have zero political overhead. I won't sacrifice that for a title I already proved I didn't need. I assured him I would keep the 5% equity and that VC Strategy Group would remain a loyal partner to Connors and Tate. My answer secured my voice in the old company without forcing me to wear the crown. I kept the power without accepting the prison. I left the steakhouse feeling a profound sense of closure, the most powerful feeling I had experienced since the day I was fired. The final ghost of my father's disapproval had been laid to rest, not by his word, but by my own decision to move beyond his orbit. That evening, I returned to our new headquarters, which was already showing signs of the company's rapid growth. I sat in my large office, looking out over the open-plan workspace, where Jordan and Natalie were still finalizing logistics schedules. I had drafted a polite but firm rejection of the CEO role, reaffirming VC Strategy Group's commitment as C&T's key partner. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from Lana. You may have won this battle, but we will never be even. I looked at the message, reading the familiar venom, and simply deleted it. Her animosity was irrelevant. I was no longer fighting for her respect or Dad's approval. I was fighting for the growth of my own company. 6 months after walking out of my former life, with a cardboard box, I was preparing for a company celebration. We were now 35 employees strong. We had multi-million-dollar contracts, and were expanding our fulfillment centers into 2 new states. I walked out of the building on a crisp autumn evening, looking up at the illuminated sign above our door. VC Strategy Group. The journey from being fired to building a thriving, independent business had been challenging, brutal, and immensely satisfying. I had transformed betrayal into spectacular success. I had learned the hard-won truth that I was already capable, already valuable, and that the approval I craved was less satisfying than the empire I had created. I knew I had many more chapters to write in my business story. But the sweetest one would always be how my sister's attempt to push me aside had inadvertently given me the push I needed to break free and build the glorious, independent enterprise I truly deserved.